The uneasy encounter. The late afternoon sun dipped low over Crestwood Avenue, painting the quiet suburban street in hues of amber and gold. 16-year-old Ayanna Marshall, fresh from her debate practice, hummed softly to the rhythm of the music playing in her car. She loved this time of day, when the world seemed calm and uncomplicated. Her mother, celebrated attorney Lauren Marshall, always said Ayanna was too optimistic for her own good. She turned onto Maple Drive, her favorite shortcut home. Lined with towering oaks and whispering leaves, the street felt like a tunnel to serenity. But serenity can be deceptive, and her heart sank as she spotted the patrol car idling at the edge of the intersection. The police car pulled onto the road behind her. Ayanna tried to steady her breathing, telling herself it was nothing. She'd done nothing wrong. Her license and registration were up to date, and she wasn't speeding. Still, a ripple of unease coursed through her as the vehicle trailed her down the quiet street. When the lights on the patrol car suddenly blazed red and blue, Ayanna's stomach twisted. "Stay calm," she whispered, pulling over to the side of the road. She silenced the radio, took a deep breath, and placed her hands on the steering wheel. The officer approached, his tall frame silhouetted by the setting sun. His stern expression grew clearer as he neared her car window. He tapped on the glass with a force that made her jump. "License and registration," he barked, his tone sharp and impatient. Ayanna handed over the documents, her hands trembling slightly. "Yes, officer," she said, keeping her voice level. She didn't want to give him any reason to escalate the situation. The officer's name tag read C. Hawthorne. His brows knitted together as he inspected her license. "What are you doing in this neighborhood?" he asked gruffly, his gaze scrutinizing her through the open window. "I was at school debate practice," Ayanna replied, gesturing toward her backpack in the passenger seat. "I'm on my way home." Hawthorne's lips pressed into a thin line. "This isn't your home neighborhood." Ayanna's breath caught. She was acutely aware of the implication behind his words. "I live 2 blocks over," she explained carefully. "Maple Drive is just my usual route." He ignored her explanation. "Step out of the vehicle." Ayanna froze. "Why?" "Did I?" "Step out now," Hawthorne interrupted, his voice laced with authority. She hesitated but eventually complied. As she stepped onto the pavement, her legs felt shaky, though she forced herself to stand tall. "Officer," she said cautiously, "can you tell me why I'm being stopped?" Hawthorne didn't answer. Instead, he pointed to her car. "Pop the trunk." Her brows furrowed. "There's nothing in my trunk. Just a spare tire and some tools." That wasn't a request. The sharpness of his tone cut through her, and her hands instinctively clenched. "With all due respect, officer, unless you have a warrant or probable cause." "Don't lecture me about the law," Hawthorne snapped, stepping closer. His hand hovered near his holster, a subtle yet unmistakable threat. Ayanna swallowed the lump in her throat. This wasn't about probable cause. This was about power. Her mother's voice echoed in her mind. "When confronted with injustice, remember, your voice is your shield. Stay calm. Stay firm." "I know my rights," she said firmly, though her voice trembled slightly. "And I've done nothing wrong." Hawthorne chuckled dryly. "Your rights," he repeated, leaning in. "Your rights don't mean much out here." The moment felt like an eternity. Ayanna's pulse thundered in her ears, and she prayed someone, anyone, would drive by. The street, however, remained eerily still, as if time itself had paused. Before Hawthorne could push further, a sleek black SUV appeared at the far end of the road. Its engine growled as it came to a halt behind the patrol car. The doors opened, and out stepped a tall, commanding woman with sharp features and an air of undeniable authority. Lauren Marshall. She wore a tailored gray suit and carried herself with the poise of someone who had walked into countless courtrooms and never lost her footing. Her heels clicked against the pavement as she approached the scene, her expression cold and unyielding. "Is there a problem, Officer Hawthorne?" Lauren asked, her voice steady, but carrying an edge that made the air around them seem heavier. Hawthorne's posture stiffened. He stepped back, momentarily caught off guard. "This is a routine stop, Mom," he said, his earlier bravado faltering. Lauren's sharp eyes scanned Ayanna, then shifted to Hawthorne. "Routine," she repeated, her tone laced with skepticism. "From where I'm standing, it looks like harassment." Hawthorne's jaw tightened. "I was just doing my job." "Your job?" Lauren stepped closer, her words cutting through the tension like a blade. "Your job doesn't include intimidating teenagers for driving home, or does it?" Hawthorne faltered. Lauren didn't let him finish. "You should think very carefully about your next move, Officer Hawthorne, because I guarantee the consequences will not be in your favor." The weight of her words hung in the air, suffocating and absolute. Hawthorne's hand twitched near his belt, but he quickly stepped back. He threw Ayanna's documents onto the hood of her car without another word and stormed back to his patrol car. Moments later, the flashing lights vanished, and the vehicle disappeared down the road. Lauren turned to Ayanna, her fierce demeanor softening into one of maternal concern. "Are you okay?" she asked, placing a hand on Ayanna's shoulder. Ayanna nodded, though her hands still trembled. I think so." Lauren's gaze shifted to the horizon, where Hawthorne had driven off. Her expression darkened with resolve. "This isn't over," she said quietly. "Not by a long shot." The unfolding battle. The sun had fully dipped below the horizon by the time Lauren and Ayanna pulled into their driveway. The glow of the porch light illuminated the crisp edges of their neatly manicured lawn, but its warmth did little to ease the tension that lingered between them. Ayanna, clutching her backpack like a lifeline, followed her mother into the house. Lauren moved with her usual precision, but her silence spoke volumes. Ayanna sank into the plush sofa in the living room, staring at her mother's retreating figure as Lauren disappeared into her home office. Moments later, the muffled hum of her mother's phone calls began. Ayanna knew that tone, sharp, deliberate, and unstoppable. Lauren was already setting the gears in motion, ready to dismantle the injustice they faced. But Ayanna wasn't so sure it would be that easy. She pulled her phone from her backpack and scrolled through the recent events. Social media was buzzing with debates and videos from similar incidents. Her fingers hovered over the record button, and she replayed the memory of Officer Hawthorne's threat. "Your rights don't mean much out here." The rage bubbled up again, but underneath it was a ripple of fear. What if her mother couldn't fix this? What if Hawthorne's words held more truth than she wanted to admit? Lauren's voice broke through her thoughts. "Ayanna, come in here." Ayanna stood hesitantly, making her way toward the office. The door was slightly ajar, revealing her mother pacing the room with her phone pressed to her ear. A large corkboard behind her was already filled with notes and pinned documents. Lauren caught Ayanna's eye and motioned for her to come in. "Thank you, Eric," Lauren said to whoever was on the other end of the line. "Send me the file as soon as possible." She hung up, placing the phone on her desk before turning to her daughter. "Sit," Lauren said, gesturing to the chair opposite her. Ayanna obeyed, her nerves prickling. Her mother's piercing gaze bore into her, not with anger, but with the weight of someone preparing for a battle. "I've contacted the precinct," Lauren began, her voice calm but resolute. "And I've filed a formal complaint against Officer Hawthorne. He has a history of questionable stops and has been flagged before for misconduct. This time, it won't be swept under the rug." Ayanna's chest tightened. "But what if it is, Mom? What if nothing happens to him? He wasn't even afraid of you, of what you could do." Lauren's expression softened, but only slightly. "Ayanna, the system works because people like me make sure it does. Hawthorne picked the wrong person to target tonight. He'll learn that soon enough." Ayanna nodded, but doubt lingered in her mind. She thought of the officer's smug expression, the way he'd dismissed her rights as though they were nothing more than words on paper. "Do you really think filing a complaint is enough?" she asked hesitantly. "No," Lauren admitted, her tone dropping. But it's the first step. We'll push harder if we have to. The silence that followed was heavy. Ayanna glanced at the corkboard behind her mother, her eyes scanning the notes and printed articles pinned to it. One headline stood out: Corruption Allegations Rock Local Precinct. The article was dated a year prior, and Lauren's handwritten notes surrounded it like a web. "What's all this?" Ayanna asked, gesturing to the board. Lauren turned, following her daughter's gaze, her lips pressed into a thin line. "This is bigger than just Hawthorne," she said after a moment. "That precinct has been under investigation for months. Corruption, abuse of power, falsified reports. Hawthorne is just one piece of a very ugly puzzle." Ayanna's heart sank. "So, what happens now?" Lauren leaned forward, her expression intense. "Now we fight. But I need you to be prepared, Ayanna. This isn't going to be easy. When you stand up to people like Hawthorne, they push back hard." Ayanna swallowed. "How hard?" "Hard enough to try to scare us into silence," Lauren said bluntly. "But they don't know who they're dealing with." Later that evening, Ayanna lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Her mother's words echoed in her mind, but they didn't erase the knot of unease in her chest. She couldn't shake the feeling that this was far from over. Her phone buzzed on the nightstand. She reached for it, her pulse quickening when she saw the notification. An email from an unknown sender. She hesitated before opening it. The message was short: "Stay out of it. For your own good." Attached was a blurry photo of her and her mother getting out of their car earlier that evening. Ayanna's breath hitched. She stared at the screen, her mind racing. Who had sent this? And why? Without thinking, she forwarded the email to her mother. Moments later, Lauren appeared in the doorway of Ayanna's room, her face calm but her eyes blazing. "Where did this come from?" Lauren asked, holding up her phone. "I don't know," Ayanna stammered. "It just showed up in my inbox." Lauren studied the email again, her jaw tightening. "It's a scare tactic," she said finally. "They want us to back off." "But who's they?" Ayanna pressed. "Hawthorne. The precinct." "Maybe both," Lauren said, sitting on the edge of the bed. "But we're not backing down." Ayanna hesitated. "Mom, what if this is dangerous? What if they—" Lauren placed a hand on her daughter's shoulder, her grip firm. "Listen to me," she said. "Fear is their weapon. It's how they keep people like us quiet. But we have the truth on our side, Ayanna, and the truth is more powerful than fear." Ayanna nodded, though the knot in her chest remained. The next day, the battle began in earnest. Lauren spent hours on the phone, calling reporters, civil rights organizations, and even state officials. By mid-afternoon, she had assembled a small army of allies, all determined to shine a light on the corruption that plagued the precinct. But the pushback came quickly. That evening, as Ayanna and Lauren sat down for dinner, the doorbell rang. Lauren answered it, only to find two uniformed officers standing on their porch. One of them held a clipboard, while the other rested a hand on his holster. "Mrs. Marshall," the first officer began, his tone overly polite. "We've received a complaint about you harassing Officer Hawthorne. We need to ask you some questions." Lauren's eyes narrowed. "Harassing?" she repeated. "You mean filing a complaint against his misconduct?" The officer's smile didn't reach his eyes. "We just need to sort this out, ma'am. It would be best if you came with us." Lauren crossed her arms. "Do you have a warrant?" The officer faltered. "We just want to talk." "Then we'll talk here," Lauren interrupted, her tone icy. "But let me make something clear. If this is an attempt to intimidate me, it won't work." The officer shifted uncomfortably, glancing at his partner. "Fine," he said finally, "but this isn't over." Lauren shut the door as they walked away, her face a mask of calm. But Ayanna could see the tension in her eyes. "What now?" Ayanna asked. Lauren exhaled. "Now, we dig deeper." Unmasking the threat. The house felt heavy with unease the next morning. Ayanna woke to the sound of her mother pacing in the kitchen, the faint clatter of coffee cups echoing through the quiet house. She could tell Lauren hadn't slept. Her pristine suit and meticulously styled hair betrayed no signs of exhaustion, but the faint dark circles under her eyes did. Ayanna sat at the table, picking at her cereal while her mother shuffled through papers and phone calls. Lauren's laptop sat open, displaying a maze of emails and documents. Among them was the blurry photograph from the anonymous email. "Mom," Ayanna said hesitantly, breaking the silence. "Do you think this is safe? I mean, for us to keep pushing?" Lauren stopped mid-stride, turning to face her daughter. "Ayanna," she said, her voice steady but firm, "you don't win battles by retreating. You win by standing your ground, no matter how hard they try to push you back." Ayanna wanted to believe her, but the knot in her stomach refused to loosen. Before she could respond, a knock at the door shattered the moment. Both mother and daughter froze, exchanging a wary glance. Lauren moved to the door, her movements careful and deliberate. She peered through the peephole before opening it just wide enough to speak. A tall man in a charcoal gray suit stood on the porch, his posture stiff but professional. "Mrs. Marshall?" he asked, his voice clipped. "Yes," Lauren replied cautiously. The man reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out an envelope. "This is for you." Lauren took the envelope but didn't open it. "And you are?" "Just a messenger," he said curtly, turning on his heel and walking away. Lauren shut the door and returned to the kitchen, holding the envelope as though it were a snake ready to strike. Ayanna leaned forward, her curiosity battling her apprehension. "What is it?" Lauren slid a finger under the flap, tearing it open. Inside was a single sheet of paper, the text typed in bold black letters. "Drop the complaint, or we escalate." Ayanna's heart raced. "They're threatening you." Lauren's jaw tightened. "No," she said, her voice low but firm. "They're threatening us." By midday, Lauren was on her third call with the district attorney's office, her tone sharp and relentless. Ayanna listened from the living room, half watching the news on TV. A familiar name caught her attention. Officer Charles Hawthorne, who has faced multiple allegations of misconduct, remains under investigation. Sources suggest connections to a larger corruption scandal involving the Crestwood Police Department. Ayanna's stomach churned. She grabbed her phone and began scrolling through local news outlets, searching for more information. The deeper she dove, the darker the picture became. Articles detailed a web of bribery, false arrests, and even accusations of violent intimidation tactics used to silence critics. Hawthorne's name appeared repeatedly, but so did others. Names Ayanna didn't recognize but made a note of. When Lauren finally ended her call, Ayanna showed her the articles. "Mom, this is huge. If we're going to fight this, we need to know everything about these people." Lauren scanned the screen, her eyes narrowing. "We're not just fighting Hawthorne," she said grimly. "We're fighting an entire system built to protect people like him." Ayanna hesitated. "But how do you fight something that big?" Lauren's gaze hardened. "You start by exposing the truth." That evening, Lauren called a trusted journalist, a fiery investigative reporter named Carmen Vasquez. Carmen had a reputation for taking on cases others were too afraid to touch, and Lauren knew she'd be the perfect ally. "I've got a story for you," Lauren began as soon as Carmen picked up. "One that goes straight to the heart of the Crestwood precinct." Carmen's voice crackled with intrigue over the phone. "I'm listening." Lauren outlined the events of the past 24 hours, from Ayanna's wrongful stop to the threats that followed. She also mentioned the broader corruption she'd uncovered, referencing specific incidents and officers, including Hawthorne. "Send me everything you have," Carmen said, her tone sharp with determination. "If what you're saying checks out, I'll make sure this story sees the light of day." Lauren hung up and turned to Ayanna. "We're not just filing complaints anymore," she said. "We're taking this public." Ayanna nodded, but the unease in her chest remained. Going public meant more eyes on them, but it also meant more risks. The following day, Lauren and Ayanna arrived at a small conference room downtown, where Carmen had arranged to meet them. The room was modest, with a single table and a few chairs, but the weight of the moment made it feel much larger. Carmen, a petite woman with sharp eyes and a no-nonsense demeanor, greeted them with a firm handshake. "Mrs. Marshall, Ayanna," she said, "thank you for coming." Lauren wasted no time, spreading out her files and documents on the table. "This is everything I have so far," she said, gesturing to the papers. "But it's only the beginning." Carmen scanned the files, her expression unreadable. "This is damning," she said finally. "If even half of this is true, it's going to shake the department to its core." "It's all true," Lauren said firmly. "And there's more where that came from." As they talked, Ayanna's phone buzzed in her pocket. She glanced at the screen and froze. It was another email from the anonymous sender. This time, the subject line read, "You were warned." Ayanna tapped the message open, her heart pounding. Attached was a video. She hesitated but pressed play. The footage was grainy, taken from what appeared to be a dashcam. It showed their house, their car, and most chillingly, a man standing outside their front door. "Mom," Ayanna said, her voice trembling. She handed the phone to Lauren. Lauren's face darkened as she watched the video. "This is an escalation," she said grimly. Carmen leaned over to look. "Do you recognize the man?" she asked. Lauren shook her head. "No, but it doesn't matter. They're trying to scare us. And it's working," Ayanna admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. "What if they come after us, Mom? What if they—" "They won't," Lauren interrupted, her tone fierce. "Because we won't let them." Carmen stood, her expression resolute. "We need to move quickly," she said. "The longer we wait, the more dangerous this gets. I'll start writing the story tonight, but we need a public face for this, a voice that people can rally behind." Lauren's gaze shifted to Ayanna, who blinked in surprise. "Me?" Ayanna asked. "You're the one who experienced this firsthand," Lauren said. "Your voice is powerful, Ayanna. If you're willing, you can make people listen." Ayanna hesitated. The thought of speaking out was terrifying, but she knew her mother was right. This wasn't just about her anymore. It was about standing up for everyone who had been silenced. "I'll do it," she said finally. "I'll tell my story." As they left the conference room, Ayanna felt a strange mix of fear and determination. She knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time, she felt like she had a weapon of her own, the truth. But as they drove home, a dark sedan pulled out behind them, its headlights glaring in the rearview mirror. Ayanna's pulse quickened. "Mom," she said cautiously, "we're being followed." Lauren's grip on the wheel tightened. "Stay calm," she said. "They're trying to intimidate us." Ayanna turned to look out the rear window. The car stayed close, its presence a constant reminder of the battle they were fighting. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. The shadow looms. The dark sedan trailed them for several blocks, its headlights glaring like an unspoken threat. Ayanna's heart raced, her fingers gripping the armrest of her seat as she glanced back at the ominous car. Lauren remained composed, though her jaw tightened with every turn she made. "We're not going home," Lauren said firmly, her eyes flicking to the rearview mirror. "We're going to the safe house." "The safe house," Ayanna repeated, her voice trembling. She had heard her mother mention the term before in hushed conversations, usually when discussing high-profile cases with sensitive witnesses. "You mean, it's that serious?" Lauren nodded, her gaze locked on the road ahead. "I called in a favor. We'll be protected there until this blows over." Ayanna bit her lip, her thoughts swirling with questions and fears. The threats, the video, the car tailing them. It was all escalating too quickly. She glanced over at her mother, who seemed unshakable, as always. But Ayanna knew better. Beneath Lauren's calm exterior was a storm brewing, one she refused to show. The sedan made another turn, sticking close as Lauren navigated toward the outskirts of the city. Ayanna's chest tightened. Mom, they're not giving up. I know, Lauren said tersely. But neither are we. The safe house was tucked away in a secluded part of town, surrounded by tall fences and dense trees. It was a modest, unassuming structure, designed to be forgettable. Lauren pulled into the driveway, the motion-activated lights casting long shadows over the gravel. A tall man in a navy suit stepped out onto the porch as they approached. He had a stern face and sharp eyes that scanned the surroundings with precision. Lauren rolled down her window. "Marcus," she greeted him. "Thanks for arranging this on such short notice." Marcus nodded, his tone professional. "Anything for you, Lauren. We've got the perimeter secured, cameras installed, and an emergency response team on call. You're safe here." Lauren gave him a small, appreciative smile before turning to Ayanna. "Come on, let's get inside." Ayanna followed her mother into the house, feeling a strange mix of relief and unease. The interior was sparse but functional, with just enough furniture to suggest comfort without drawing attention. Marcus locked the door behind them, his expression unreadable. "We've got some updates," he said, pulling out a tablet. "The threats you've received. Our team traced the email server. It's a dead end. Whoever sent them knows how to cover their tracks." Lauren's face hardened. "What about the video? The man outside my house?" Marcus hesitated. "We're still working on identifying him. But there's more." He handed the tablet to Lauren. "You'll want to see this." Lauren's eyes scanned the screen, her lips pressing into a thin line. Ayanna leaned closer, her curiosity piqued. On the tablet was a series of files: bank records, transaction logs, and internal memos from the Crestwood Police Department. "What is all this?" Ayanna asked. Marcus glanced at her before answering. "Proof of systemic corruption within the precinct. Bribes, falsified charges, kickbacks from local businesses, all tied to a network of officers, including Hawthorne." Lauren exhaled sharply. "This is exactly what we needed. With this, we can." "Wait," Marcus interrupted, his tone grim. "There's more. Scroll down." Lauren did, her eyes narrowing as she took in the next set of documents. These weren't financial records. They were surveillance reports. Detailed logs of her movements, her cases, and even her family. "They've been watching you for months," Marcus said quietly. "Maybe longer." Ayanna's stomach twisted. "What do you mean watching us? Like spotting?" "More than spying," Marcus replied. "They know your routines, your connections. They'd been waiting for the right moment to strike." Lauren's grip on the tablet tightened. "They underestimated us," she said coldly. "This ends now." The safe house buzzed with quiet activity as Marcus's team worked to secure the new evidence. Ayanna sat on the couch, scrolling through social media while her mind raced. The story about Officer Hawthorne was gaining traction, with Carmen Vasquez's article leading the charge. Comments flooded in from people who shared similar experiences. Traffic stops that turned hostile, baseless accusations, and the pervasive fear of standing up against authority. Ayanna's phone buzzed. It was Carmen. She answered quickly. "Hello. Ayanna, I need to warn you," Carmen said, her voice urgent. "The article is live, but I'm getting pushback. Anonymous calls, threats to shut it down. These people are serious about keeping their secrets buried." Ayanna glanced at her mother, who was deep in conversation with Marcus. "What should we do?" "Stay where you are and stay alert," Carmen advised. "The more noise we make, the harder it will be for them to silence us. But be prepared. They won't go down without a fight." Ayanna hung up, her heart pounding. She turned to Lauren. "Mom, Carmen says they're trying to shut down the article." Lauren's jaw tightened. Let them try. The truth is already out there. But Ayanna couldn't shake the feeling that the fight was far from over. Later that night, Ayanna sat by the window, staring out at the dark woods that surrounded the safe house. The quiet was unnerving, broken only by the occasional rustle of leaves in the wind. She thought of her friends, her school, And the life that seemed so distant now. Would things ever go back to normal? Her phone buzzed again. Another email. This time, the subject line read, "TikTok." Attached was a grainy photo of the safe house. Ayana's breath caught. She bolted to her mother's room, her phone clutched tightly in her hand. "Mom," she exclaimed, bursting through the door. Lauren and Marcus looked up from their conversation, alarmed. "What is it?" Lauren asked. Ayana handed her the phone. Lauren's face darkened as she read the message. "They know where we are." Marcus grabbed a radio. "We're moving you both now," he said. "We can't take any chances." Lauren stood, her expression fierce. "Ayana, grab your things. We're leaving." As they prepared to leave, the lights outside the safe house flickered. Marcus's radio crackled with static. "Perimeter breach," a voice reported. "We've got movement. Unidentified vehicles approaching." Ayana's heart raced as Lauren grabbed her hand, pulling her toward the back door. Marcus and his team moved quickly, securing exits and positioning themselves defensively. "Stay close to me," Lauren whispered. "No matter what happens, stay close." Ayana nodded, fear gripping her as the sound of engines grew louder. She could see the headlights cutting through the trees, illuminating the night like searchlights. Whoever was coming wasn't trying to hide. The back door burst open, and Marcus ushered them into an armored SUV. "Go," he said to the driver. "Get them to the secondary location." "What about you?" Lauren demanded. "We'll hold them off," Marcus replied, his tone leaving no room for argument. The SUV sped away, the tires kicking up gravel as it raced down the narrow road. Ayana clutched her seatbelt, her knuckles white. She glanced out the rear window, watching the safe house disappear into the darkness. For a moment, there was silence. Then, from the woods behind them, came the unmistakable sound of gunfire. The truth in shadows. The SUV roared down the narrow, winding road, its headlights slicing through the darkness like a desperate plea for escape. Ayana sat in the back seat, gripping the armrest as her heart raced with every bump and turn. The faint echoes of gunfire from the safe house faded into the distance, but the fear they left behind lingered. Lauren sat beside her, her hand gripping Ayana's knee for reassurance, though her own tension was palpable. The driver, a stoic man with a grim expression, focused intently on the road ahead. "Where are we going?" Ayana asked, her voice trembling. "To a fallback location," the driver replied curtly. "Someplace they won't find you." Lauren glanced at him. "And Marcus?" "The team. They'll hold as long as they can," the driver said, his tone clipped. "We'll regroup once you're secure." Ayana turned her gaze to the window, her breath fogging the glass as she stared into the shadowy forest. For the first time, she felt the weight of just how deep this went. This wasn't just about Hawthorne or the corruption in the precinct. It was a machine, and her family had become its target. The fallback location was a secluded cabin deep in the woods, far from prying eyes. The SUV pulled up to the rustic structure, its weathered wood and stone chimney blending seamlessly with the surrounding trees. The driver exited first, scanning the area before motioning for Lauren and Ayana to follow. Inside, the cabin was surprisingly well equipped. A fire roared in the hearth, and the faint hum of a generator powered the lights. Lauren wasted no time checking the windows and securing the doors, while Ayana sank into an armchair, her body trembling with exhaustion. The driver handed Lauren a satellite phone. "This line is secure. Use it only if necessary," he said before stepping back outside to keep watch. Lauren crouched in front of Ayana, placing her hands on her daughter's shoulders. "We're safe for now," she said, her voice steady. "But we need to stay vigilant." Ayana nodded, though her thoughts were elsewhere. The image of the email, the blurry photo of the safe house, burned in her mind. Someone had known exactly where they were, and they'd made it clear they could strike any time. "Mom," Ayana said, her voice breaking slightly. "How did they find us?" Lauren hesitated, her expression grim. There's a leak somewhere. Someone on the inside is feeding them information. Inside? You mean Marcus's team? Maybe, Lauren admitted. Or someone at the precinct. Either way, we can't trust anyone right now. Ayanna swallowed hard. The paranoia gnawed at her, but she knew her mother was right. Hours passed in uneasy silence. Lauren reviewed the files Marcus had given her, her brow furrowed as she pieced together the web of corruption that had ensnared them. Ayanna watched her from the couch, the faint glow of her phone illuminating her face as she scrolled through social media. Carmen's article had gone viral. The comment sections were flooded with outrage and support, with many demanding an investigation into the Crestwood Police Department. But mixed among the supportive messages were ominous ones, anonymous accounts claiming the story was fake, warning Carmen to back off, and even threatening violence. Ayanna's phone buzzed. Another email. Her heart sank as she opened it. This time, there was no message, just a video file. With trembling fingers, she pressed play. The video was shaky, filmed from what seemed to be a hidden camera. It showed Lauren's car parked outside the cabin, the SUV nearby, and a shadowy figure moving through the trees. The camera zoomed in on the cabin window, where Ayanna could see herself sitting on the couch. She dropped the phone, her breath hitching. "Mom," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They're here." Lauren looked up sharply, her eyes narrowing as Ayanna handed her the phone. Lauren's face darkened as she watched the video. "Stay here," she said firmly, rising to her feet. "No," Ayanna said, her voice shaking. "You can't go out there alone." Lauren hesitated, but nodded. "Fine. Stay close to me." They moved cautiously through the cabin, Lauren gripping a small handgun she'd retrieved from a locked case. The driver met them at the door, his own weapon drawn. "What's going on?" he asked. "They're watching us," Lauren said, showing him the video. The driver's face hardened. "Stay inside. I'll check the perimeter." "No," Lauren said sharply. "We stay together." Reluctantly, the driver agreed, and the three of them stepped outside into the cold night air. The forest was eerily quiet, the only sound the crunch of leaves beneath their feet. Lauren scanned the shadows, her grip on the gun steady. Ayanna's heart pounded as she followed close behind, her eyes darting to every flicker of movement. She felt exposed, vulnerable, as though eyes were watching them from every angle. Suddenly, a branch snapped nearby. Lauren whirled toward the sound, her gun raised. "Who's there?" she called out. No answer. The driver moved ahead, his flashlight cutting through the darkness. He stopped abruptly, his light landing on a piece of paper pinned to a tree with a knife. He pulled it down and handed it to Lauren. Written in bold, scrawled letters were the words, "You can't run forever." Lauren's jaw tightened. "Get back inside. Now." Back in the cabin, Lauren locked the doors and drew the curtains. The driver stayed near the window, keeping watch while Ayanna and Lauren huddled by the fire. "This isn't sustainable," Lauren muttered, running a hand through her hair. "We can't keep running. We need to take control of this." "How?" Ayanna asked, her voice shaking. "They're everywhere. They know everything." Lauren's eyes flashed with determination. "Then we expose them faster than they can silence us." She grabbed the satellite phone and dialed Carmen. "We need to escalate," she said as soon as Carmen picked up. "The article isn't enough. We need a press conference, public, live, with every media outlet watching." Carmen hesitated. "Lauren, that's risky. They'll try to shut it down." "Let them try," Lauren said. "The more eyes on us, the harder it'll be for them to act." Carmen sighed. "All right, I'll make the arrangements. Tomorrow morning, 10 a.m., downtown. Be ready." Lauren hung up and turned to Ayanna. "This is our chance," she said. "We're going to make them face the truth." Ayanna nodded, though fear still gnawed at her. She knew her mother was right, but the risks were mounting. As the fire crackled in the hearth, Ayanna couldn't help but wonder, How far would their enemies go to protect their secrets? The next morning, the cabin was silent as they prepared to leave. Marcus had sent a backup team to escort them to the press conference, their SUVs forming a protective convoy. Ayanna's stomach churned with anxiety as she climbed into the car, the weight of the day pressing down on her. As they drove toward the city, Ayanna clutched her phone, her fingers hovering over the video file she'd received the night before. The image of the shadowy figure outside the cabin haunted her, a reminder of just how close their enemies had come. Lauren sat beside her, her expression steely. "Are you ready?" she asked. Ayanna nodded, though her hands trembled. "I think so." Lauren placed a hand on her shoulder. "You're stronger than you think, Ayanna. Remember that." The convoy entered the city, the tall buildings and bustling streets, a stark contrast to the isolation of the woods. As they approached the press conference location, Ayanna's phone buzzed with another email. She opened it hesitantly. The subject line read, "Last chance." Attached was a single sentence, "Walk away, or we'll make you disappear." Ayanna swallowed hard, her resolve wavering. But as she looked at her mother, the fear was replaced by something stronger, determination. "Let them try," she whispered to herself. "I'm not backing down." The turning point. The convoy slowed as it neared the city's civic center, where a crowd had already begun to gather. Reporters, camera crews, and curious onlookers lined the sidewalks, their faces a mix of curiosity and anticipation. Ayanna's stomach churned as she caught sight of the microphones and cameras set up near the podium. Lauren's hand rested on Ayanna's shoulder. "This is our moment," she said firmly. "Whatever they've tried to do to scare us, it ends here." Ayanna nodded, though her palms were slick with sweat. She could feel the weight of what they were about to do pressing down on her. This wasn't just about clearing her name or standing up to one corrupt officer. It was about exposing a system that thrived on fear and silence. As they stepped out of the SUV, the roar of the crowd hit her like a wave. Ayanna's breath hitched, but Lauren's steady presence beside her gave her strength. They walked together toward the podium, flanked by Marcus and his team, who scanned the crowd for any signs of danger. Carmen Vasquez was already at the podium, her sharp eyes sweeping the scene. She greeted Lauren and Ayanna with a nod. "We've got full coverage," she said, her voice low. "This is being broadcast live on every major network." Lauren smiled faintly. "Good. Let's make it count." The press conference began with Carmen recounting the key points of the investigation: officer misconduct, systemic corruption, and the harassment faced by those who dared to speak out. The crowd murmured in agreement, their anger palpable. When it was Lauren's turn to speak, she stepped up to the microphone with the confidence of someone who had spent years in courtrooms dismantling lies. Her voice was steady, but her words cut like a blade. "We are here today to shine a light on the darkness that has plagued our community for far too long," she began. "This is not just about one officer or one family. This is about a system that has allowed injustice to thrive unchecked." She recounted the events of the past days: the wrongful traffic stop, the threats, and the attempts to silence her and Ayanna. She held up the documents Marcus had given her, detailing the corruption within the Crestwood precinct. "This is the truth they don't want you to see," Lauren said, her voice rising. "But we will not be silenced. We will not back down." The crowd erupted into applause, their cheers drowning out the faint hum of nearby traffic. Ayanna's turn came next. She hesitated as she approached the microphone, her heart pounding so loudly she could barely hear the noise around her. She looked out at the sea of faces, some expectant, some skeptical, and took a deep breath. "My name is Ayanna Marshall," she began, her voice shaking slightly, "and I'm here because I refuse to be a victim." The crowd quieted, leaning in to hear her words. "I was stopped by Officer Hawthorne for no reason," she continued. "I was humiliated, threatened, and made to feel powerless. But I'm not powerless. None of us are. And I'm standing here today because we deserve better." She paused, her gaze sweeping the crowd. This isn't just my fight. This is our fight. And together, we can demand the justice and accountability we all deserve. The crowd erupted once more, their cheers and chants filling the air. Ayanna stepped back from the microphone, her chest heaving with a mix of relief and exhilaration. Lauren squeezed her hand, her eyes shining with pride. As the press conference wrapped up, Lauren, Ayanna, and Carmen were escorted back to the SUVs by Marcus's team. The mood was electric, but the danger still loomed. Ayanna could feel it in the way Marcus's team scanned the crowd, their hands hovering near their holsters. As they climbed into the vehicle, Marcus turned to Lauren. "We've stirred the hornet's nest," he said grimly. "Expect retaliation." Lauren nodded. "Let them come. We're ready." The convoy began to move, the vehicles weaving through the crowded streets. Ayanna watched the city blur past her window, her thoughts racing. They had taken a stand, but the fight was far from over. Her phone buzzed again. She hesitated before opening the message. This time, the email contained no threats, no cryptic warnings. Instead, it was a single sentence. "You think you've won, but the game has just begun." Ayanna's stomach turned. She showed the message to Lauren, who read it with a hardened expression. "They're trying to rattle us," Lauren said. "Don't let them." Ayanna nodded, though the unease in her chest remained. Just as the convoy approached the outskirts of the city, the lead SUV came to a sudden stop. Marcus's voice crackled over the radio. "We've got a roadblock up ahead. Everyone stay alert." Lauren frowned, her eyes narrowing as she peered out the window. Two black sedans were parked across the road, their occupants standing in front with crossed arms. They were dressed in plain clothes, but their posture screamed authority. Marcus stepped out of his vehicle, his hand on his weapon. "What's going on here?" he called out. One of the men stepped forward, his expression smug. "This is as far as you go," he said. "Turn around, and we'll pretend this never happened." Lauren opened the door and stepped out, her heels clicking against the pavement. "We're not turning around," she said firmly. "Get out of our way." The man chuckled. "Mrs. Marshall, you've made a lot of enemies in a very short time. I suggest you think carefully about your next move." Lauren's jaw tightened. "I already have. And so should you, because if you think you can intimidate us, you're sorely mistaken." The man's smirk faltered, but he held his ground. "Last warning." Before he could say more, the distant wail of sirens filled the air. The man's face darkened as police vehicles appeared on the horizon, their lights flashing. "You're lucky this time," he muttered, stepping back toward his car. "But this isn't over." The sedan sped off, leaving the road clear. Marcus waved for the convoy to proceed, his expression tense. "We need to get you somewhere secure," he said. Lauren nodded, but her eyes remained fixed on the road ahead. "No more running," she said. "We fight back." The final stand. The sirens faded as the convoy rolled onward, the black sedans now a memory, though their ominous warning lingered in the air. Ayanna sat silently in the back seat, her phone clutched tightly in her hands. Lauren, seated beside her, was deep in thought, her sharp eyes scanning the road ahead. "Mom," Ayanna said quietly, breaking the silence. "What if they don't stop? What if they just keep coming?" Lauren turned to her daughter, her expression softening. "They might, Ayanna," she admitted. "But bullies thrive on fear. The more they see us stand firm, the harder it will be for them to keep this up." Ayanna nodded, but doubt still gnawed at her. What if standing firm isn't enough? Lauren reached over, squeezing Ayanna's hand. "Then we don't just stand. We fight." The convoy pulled into a fortified building on the edge of the city, an unmarked location used by Marcus's team for high-stakes operations. Inside, the space was a hive of activity. Computers hummed, monitors displayed live feeds from cameras around the city, and a team of operatives worked with quiet precision. Lauren and Ayanna were escorted to a secure room at the center of the facility. Marcus joined them moments later, his expression grave. "They're escalating," he said, wasting no time. The roadblock wasn't just a scare tactic. They were testing how far they could push us. Lauren folded her arms. "And now we push back." Marcus nodded. "I've got my team tracing every connection we can find. The files we pulled from the precinct are just the tip of the iceberg. If we dig deep enough, we'll uncover the entire network." Ayanna listened quietly, the weight of their words sinking in. This wasn't just a fight for justice anymore. It was a war against a deeply entrenched system. A system that wouldn't go down without a fight. "What can I do?" Ayanna asked, her voice steady despite the fear bubbling beneath the surface. Lauren and Marcus exchanged a glance. "You've already done more than enough," Lauren began, but Ayanna shook her head. "No," she said firmly. "I started this. I'm part of this. Tell me what I can do." Marcus smiled faintly. "You're your mother's daughter," he said. "All right. We're going public again, but this time, we're naming names. We need you to share your story, everything, including the threats. It's the only way to keep the pressure on." Ayanna hesitated, the thought of reliving the trauma making her chest tighten. But she nodded. "I'll do it." Hours later, Ayanna sat in front of a camera, her hands folded tightly in her lap. Carmen stood behind the lens, her voice calm and reassuring, as she guided Ayanna through the process. "Just speak from the heart," Carmen said. "People need to hear the truth." Ayanna took a deep breath, her gaze locking on the camera. "My name is Ayanna Marshall," she began, "and I'm here to tell you what happened to me, and what's been happening to so many others who don't have the chance to speak out." She recounted the traffic stop, the threats, the intimidation tactics. Her voice trembled at first, but as she spoke, she found her strength. She described the fear she'd felt and the determination that followed. And she called on everyone watching to stand with her and her mother in demanding accountability. The video was uploaded immediately, shared across social media and news outlets. Within hours, it went viral. Hashtags demanding justice trended worldwide, and Ayanna's story became a rallying cry for a movement far bigger than she could have imagined. But the victory was short-lived. That evening, as Ayanna and Lauren sat in the secure room, Marcus burst in, his face pale. "We've got a problem," he said, his voice urgent. He motioned for them to follow him to the control room, where a monitor displayed a live feed of a breaking news broadcast. The anchor's voice was somber as she delivered the report. Footage leaked from an unknown source shows what appears to be Lauren Marshall engaging in a heated exchange with an unidentified officer. The video, heavily edited, raises questions about Marshall's conduct and the credibility of her allegations. The screen cut to the footage. Lauren standing inches from an officer, her finger pointed as she argued with him. The audio had been manipulated, making it sound like she was threatening him. Ayanna's stomach dropped. "That's not what happened," she said, her voice shaking. "They're twisting it." Lauren's face darkened. "This is a smear campaign," she said. "They're trying to discredit us." Marcus nodded. "And it's working. Social media is already turning. They're accusing you of fabricating evidence, of using Ayanna as a pawn." Lauren clenched her fists. "We fight fire with fire," she said. "We release the unedited footage." Marcus hesitated. "It's risky. They could spin it again." "Let them try," Lauren said fiercely. "We've come too far to back down now." Over the next few hours, Marcus's team worked tirelessly to counter the smear campaign. They released the unedited footage, along with evidence proving the leaked video had been doctored. Carmen published another article exposing the lengths the corrupt network was going to silence Lauren and Ayanna. The public backlash was swift. Protests erupted outside the Crestwood Police Department, demanding justice not just for Ayanna, but for all the victims of the precinct's corruption. The pressure mounted. forcing the city's mayor to announce a full-scale investigation into the department. But the fight wasn't over. As night fell, the facility's alarms blared. Ayanna's heart raced as Marcus's voice echoed over the intercom. "We've got company. Secure yourselves and stay out of sight." Lauren grabbed Ayanna's hand, pulling her toward a hidden passage at the back of the facility. "Stay close," she whispered. "No matter what happens, we stick together." The sounds of shouting and gunfire filled the air as the building shook with the force of an explosion. Ayanna's breath hitched as they stumbled through the dark corridor, her mother's grip the only thing grounding her. They emerged into the cool night air, the chaos of the facility behind them. Marcus met them at a waiting vehicle, his face bruised but determined. "Go," he said to the driver. "I'll hold them off." "No," Lauren said firmly. "You're coming with us." Marcus hesitated but nodded, climbing into the car. As they sped away, the flames of the burning facility lit up the night sky. The next morning, headlines blared across every platform. Crestwood corruption exposed. Officers arrested, department in turmoil. The investigation had uncovered a trove of evidence linking high-ranking officers to organized crime, extortion, and cover-ups. Hawthorne was among those arrested, his smug demeanor replaced with a scowl in his mugshot. Lauren and Ayanna watched the news from a hotel room. Exhaustion etched into their faces, but for the first time, there was a flicker of hope. "We did it," Ayanna said softly. Lauren smiled faintly. "No, Ayanna," she said. "You did it. You stood up. You fought back. And you made them listen." Ayanna's chest swelled with pride. The fight wasn't over. There were still battles to be fought, truths to uncover. But for now, they had won. And that was enough. Victory through shadows. As the first rays of dawn broke through the curtains of the hotel room, Ayanna woke to the hum of her phone. Her mother sat across the room, poring over documents on her laptop, her expression a blend of satisfaction and exhaustion. The weight of their victory hung in the air, tempered by the knowledge that the fight was far from over. Ayanna's phone buzzed again. It was a notification from Carmen's news outlet, which had just published an update. She opened the article, her heart racing, as she read the headline. "Crestwood whistleblowers vindicated. Federal task force seizes records, promises sweeping reforms." She turned to her mother, holding up the phone. "Mom, look." Lauren glanced at the screen, her lips curving into a small smile. "It's happening," she said softly. "They're finally being held accountable." The aftermath. The fallout from the Crestwood Police Department scandal was immediate and far-reaching. Within hours of the federal task force's announcement, officers implicated in the corruption scheme were arrested. Public officials who had turned a blind eye to the misconduct faced mounting pressure to resign. The public's outrage swelled, fueling protests and demands for systemic reforms. Ayanna and Lauren became central figures in the movement. Ayanna's video testimony had inspired countless others to come forward with their own stories of injustice, creating a wave of solidarity that no amount of intimidation could quell. But with the victory came new challenges. The shadows pushed back. 3 days after the arrests, Lauren received a chilling email. The subject line read, "This isn't over." Attached was a video of Ayanna at the press conference, her words distorted to sound like a fabricated confession. Lauren slammed her laptop shut, her jaw tightening. "They're desperate," she muttered. Ayanna, who had been sitting nearby, looked up. "What now?" Lauren placed a hand on her shoulder. "Now we keep moving forward. They can't stop the truth, no matter how hard they try." That evening, Marcus arrived at the hotel with an update. His team had tracked down the source of the latest smear campaign, an offshoot of the corrupt network still trying to operate in the shadows. "They're fragmented," Marcus explained, "but they're still dangerous. We have to stay vigilant." Ayanna frowned. "So this isn't really over, is it?" Marcus shook his head. "Not yet, but the tide has turned, and they're running out of places to hide." A new chapter. Over the next few weeks, Ayanna and Lauren worked tirelessly with Carmen and other advocates to ensure the momentum of the movement didn't fade. Ayanna spoke at rallies, shared her story with more media outlets, and even began working with youth organizations to educate others about their rights. Lauren, meanwhile, led a legal team that filed a class action lawsuit against the Crestwood Police Department and the city officials who had enabled its corruption. The case gained national attention, becoming a symbol of accountability and resilience. The threats didn't stop, but they no longer carried the same weight. Ayanna and Lauren had built a network of allies and supporters who stood with them, their voices drowning out those who sought to silence them. The quiet victory. One evening, as Ayanna and Lauren sat on the hotel balcony overlooking the city, Ayanna turned to her mother. "Do you think it's worth it?" she asked quietly. "All of this. The fear, the threats." Lauren took a deep breath, gazing out at the skyline. "It's always worth it," she said, "because every step we take, every truth we expose, we make it harder for them to hide. And maybe, just maybe, we make it easier for someone else to stand up and fight." Ayanna nodded, her heart swelling with a mix of pride and determination. She thought back to the moment in the car when she had first been stopped by Hawthorne. The fear she had felt then was still there, but it had transformed into something stronger, resolve. As the city lights twinkled in the distance, Ayanna smiled. They had won a battle, but more importantly, they had ignited a fire that couldn't be extinguished. And for the first time, Ayanna felt truly powerful.